Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending our private sector law panel. We'd also like to thank all the lawyers who are joining us today to answer all the Q&A questions. I guess just to get started, if each of the lawyers could tell us a little bit about themselves and what type of law each of you guys practice. I guess we can start with Susan and then go from there, and anyone, yeah.
Sure. I'm Susan Alker. I have been practicing law for about 25 years. I graduated from UCLA in 1997, and I am a transactional lawyer. I have focused mostly on financial transactions, bank loans, securities offerings, that sort of thing. And my practice has primarily been with big law firms. I started at O'Melveny and Myers, and then I became a partner at Reed Smith and at Winston and Strawn. But I've also been in-house counsel. I was general counsel for a couple of investment management companies, and now I have my own firm.
Would Nadia would like to go next? Thank you, Susan, so much. I love how you went to UCLA too.
Hi, so my name is Nadia Yakoob. I've been practicing immigration law for the last 23 years. I went to UCLA for undergrad and graduated from there in 95, and then went to law school in DC. And interestingly enough, I was inspired to go to law school in DC because when I was an undergrad at UCLA, I did the Center for American Public Policy and Politics semester in DC. And I just loved it, and I loved being in DC. So I ended up wanting to go to law school in DC for that reason. I also started at, after graduating from law school, I worked at the world's largest immigration law firm for about 8 years in their New York, Brussels, and then San Francisco offices. Then I went in the judiciary for 5 years in the Federal Court of Appeals. And then I also started my own practice. So I relate to Susan. You know, we worked in big firms. I also spent 5 years in the government because there was a time where I thought maybe I'd like to go work with the courts. And then after 5 years there, I realized I wanted to be back in private practice.
Wow, that's really great. I'm excited to hear more about you and Susan, like running your own firms and hearing more about that.
Hi, I'll go next. I am Cynthia Santiago. I go by Abogada Cynthia Santiago. I have been practicing since 2012, so I'm very honored and privileged that I feel very honored and privileged that I am with two attorneys that have been practicing for many years with much more experience. I have a little bit of a background with UCLA. In high school, I was a student at a UCLA campus taking courses that were basically for research of the community and of the school system and the school to prison pipeline. So my background at UCLA was mostly when I was in high school, taking classes over the summer through this research project that was being done. And after high school, I attended Wesleyan University in Connecticut, where I was given a full scholarship. So I went all the way to Connecticut for that opportunity. And then I returned back to Southwestern Law School here in Los Angeles. I come from a first generation immigrant parent background. So I knew immediately that I wanted to focus on immigration and criminal defense. Criminal defense was at my heart because as a child, I saw the wrongful incarceration of my brother when I was 9 years old. And so I always had that feeling of wanting to stand up for justice and represent people that didn't have access to justice. So, or to lawyers or to just the system as a whole. So when I was back at Southwestern Law School, I was able to get a working opportunity to work for an attorney of 25 years. He had an immigration and criminal law firm, private practice. And there he actually placed me at the Mexican consulate, and I was meeting families and doing intakes for hundreds of people that were coming in to ask about their immigration or their criminal situation. So I believe that that allowed me to gain some skill sets, and then making wonderful mentors throughout, like meeting wonderful mentors and getting these connections made when I was in law school, allowed me the opportunity to open my firm when I was just starting. When I passed the bar, a few months later, I opened up my firm, and I've been practicing for the past 10 years as a private immigration and criminal defense attorney. I want to say that I am what's called a community lawyer. I do hundreds of events in the community where I go with a van that has my face on it, and we go and open up, just at community events, and we just open up a table and I just talk to people. And I really just want people to have an access to an attorney, even if it's for 15 or 20 minutes, but at least have somebody that will listen to their immigration or criminal defense need.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think it's amazing how you advocate for equitable justice and representing everyone. Kind of going off of that, I was wondering if you each could share a little bit more about your journey into becoming a lawyer, and whether or not going into law was what you originally had wanted going into undergrad, and what path led you into law school.
Okay, I'll go first. I did not want to be a lawyer when I was growing up. I wanted to be either a marine biologist or a ballerina or something else, but I really had no interest in the law. When I graduated from undergrad, I went to business school. I got a job and I went to business school at night, and I got an MBA. And I was thinking that that would just give me lots of options, and it did. But I hadn't really figured out what I wanted to do. I just knew I was going to get a job of some kind. And so while I was working at an engineering firm, I wasn't an engineer, but I was working there. I got to know a lot of the lawyers. I ended up working with a lot of in-house lawyers. And I started to realize that what they did was actually really cool. And I thought it was fun. So the more I thought about it, I think, maybe I should go to law school and become a lawyer. And when when I graduated from my MBA program, I applied to law school. I got into UCLA and I went there, and I was probably the only person in my law school class whose parents had not been at all encouraging about becoming a lawyer. So my parents actually didn't want me to be a lawyer, and also who wanted to be an in-house lawyer. Like what I had, I really thought, those are the people I liked. What they did for a living is what I wanted to do. And so I wanted to not just do corporate, but in-house corporate. And most people I knew wanted to do litigation. They were interested in the kind of law that they saw on TV with people in the courtroom and all that. And I had no interest in that. So yeah, I ended up as a lawyer, and I've been very happy with my choice. It was the right fit for me, but through a different a path that was kind of unusual.
We can continue in the same order as before. So Nadia and then Cynthia.
Okay. Well, I definitely didn't think I was going to be a lawyer, maybe like as a young child, but definitely once I went into high school, I really loved speech team, and I was on student leadership and in high school. And when I went to UCLA, I really found that I liked the writing classes. And then again, that semester in Washington, D.C., I worked for UNHCR, which is the UN's High Commissioner for Refugees. And like Cynthia, my choice to be an immigration lawyer stems from my own personal experience. I immigrated to the US when I was 10. And actually, it's funny, my client base is very similar to my dad and his brothers, because they came to the US to study from Pakistan in the 60s. And then my one uncle got a job, got a green card, became a citizen. My other uncle married an American, got a green card, became a citizen, and then one of them, there was always a dispute on who it was, but one of them sponsored my dad. Now my dad got a job in Singapore after finishing his studies here, but he was waiting in line for 13 years to get his green card, by which time he has gotten married and had 3 kids, and we all immigrated with him. So, you know, I am a believer in the system. I am a believer in the process. I know it's slow. I know it's frustrating, but it does work. You know, we all came over, we all naturalized. And so that really informed my interest in immigration law. So like finding my strengths in high school and college around writing and public speaking and leadership informed the law piece. And then I think the kind of law was very much informed by my personal experiences. And then one thing, you know, I'm looking at all your questions, and one thing I wanted to say is that I just want to jump right into this. One of my regrets was that I went straight through. So I didn't do, you know, what Susan and Cynthia, it sounds like, did, which it sounds like maybe took some time off. I actually finished college early. So I wrapped up in 3 years, and then I spent a year studying Arabic in Tunisia. It was just like this thing I wanted to do, my own version of a study abroad. But then I went straight to law school. And what I found is that I was quite not as mature as those students who had worked. And I mean, I now have my own practice, and I have 4 legal assistants. And to each of them, they're just young graduates. They all want to go to college, law school. And I tell all of them that they've made such a good decision working at a law firm, you know, for a couple of years before going to law school, because law school it's a trade school. Okay. It's not grad school in the traditional sense. It's very much like teaching you a vocation. And so the people tend to be very like savvy, and if they've worked, especially in DC, a lot of them had worked on the Hill, a lot of them had worked for federal agencies. They were very mature, they were very smart in how they managed their time and how they approached the studies. So you know, my journey was straight through. Now, after 1 year of law school, I actually was quite overwhelmed by it. So I withdrew and went and did a master's in London in international relations, which was more like an extension of college, right? But while I was doing that, I realized, oh, okay, now I get the mindset I need to do well in law school. So then I transferred, and then I returned to law school and finished up. So that was kind of my journey, and my one tip, because I know that is one thing you guys are asking later on down, but I kind of wanted to jump ahead because it's very much part of my journey, is that I didn't take time out. And I very much recommend that to all of you guys on the panel, is go work, you know, go work for a couple of years. Before you go to law school. It's a lot of money that if you have to take student loans like I did, it's a lot of money you're investing in yourself. And the more professionally experienced you are, I think the better that investment will feel. So those are some of my thoughts.
I completely agree. I did do a straight through, but then I had to do a part-time program, a full-time program, and it was a lot of just a lot of intense work that I really think that should be thought out completely and not rushed in just because you have this mind frame. I had the intention of becoming an attorney, a criminal defense attorney, when I was young, because of the experience of being in a courthouse, a criminal courthouse, and seeing mostly men, older men, that were talking about this system, but they weren't communicating with their client base. They were going inside, doing their thing, making their own agendas, and then coming back with a very brief, I don't have time for you. And I think that's what what impacted where I see myself as an attorney. I go through a lot of my cases with my clients and consults, trying to really educate folks of their rights, because I did not see that as a child. I remember my parents, um, their experience of not understanding the system, wanting to help their son, which is my brother, and him navigating through being an 18-year-old facing 2 strikes under California's criminal 3 strikes law. So basically, he would undergo with another strike, he would basically go to jail for 25 years to life. And so his whole life was impacted by this situation. And I didn't know what else to do but to say, one day I'm going to represent people, and I want to represent people the way that they should know what they're getting into, what their rights are. And the whole path through like high school and college was me being so so intense about wanting to be a voice for the community that I began like becoming an activist for the community. I was on community boards. I was speaking at rallies and events about social justice issues. And so I think those are things that are they do well for, like, my role as an attorney now. But I think that what Nadia was mentioning about, like, I had this mind frame of going to law school, and I didn't give myself a break. And once I hit law school, I had a, real life experience of, like, your law school is not just something you can cruise by. You have to be really focused in law school. You can't just give it a bare minimum, and you can't be involved in a lot of things. And I used to be that person that wanted to be involved in a lot of things. And so I really had to come back to focus and try to get through law school, because it was a very intense experience for me. When I was in law school, I had the opportunity to work for a law firm, because I ended up taking a part-time program. I was about to withdraw for a semester, but I ended up doing a part-time program. And that's where I kind of got that fire again, that I wanted to finish off well. I had the experience of then meeting people and going through like issue spotting so that I could be prepared for the bar exam. So I did not want to be an immigration attorney. I didn't think about immigration law until I got into the real life experience of meeting families and understanding the intersection between how somebody's criminal no license warrant could impact their ability to stay in the country, because now they're being sent to immigration and they're in a process of deportation. So those are the client bases that I usually work with, is folks that have had some kind of criminal issue that ends up becoming an immigration consequence for them, and just really helping families through that intersection of crimmigration.
If I could just follow up on the concept of taking time off between undergrad and law school. I certainly found that was helpful for me, but it's not needed for everyone. And I also think it depends what job you're doing. And I would absolutely caution against working for a big law firm, because big law is a very different kind of experience if you're not a lawyer. If you go and work there as a paralegal, it's a terrible grind, and you don't get to do any of the fun stuff that the lawyers get to do. So it's not good. Smaller firms, as a paralegal or a legal assistant or law clerk or whatever you might get called, provide a lot of good experience, a lot more fun things that you get to step in and do. You get to actually meet clients and, and do real law type things. So choose your employer carefully if you choose to take time off. I also think that if you're motivated enough, you can just go straight on through. I mean, why spend time doing something else and then go be a lawyer? If you know you want to be a lawyer, go to law school, but know that, and what the others have said here is absolutely true. Law school is hard. It is very hard. And I say this having been, I had finished business school right before I went to law school, and law school was not at all similar to business school. It was much, much harder. It is like a full-time job, and it takes a lot of effort. again, totally worth it. If what you want to do is practice law, this is the ticket, the admission ticket to practicing law. And you do learn a lot of useful things, and it can be wonderful if it's what you want to do. What I would again say is, if you're not sure you want to be a lawyer, then don't go to law school. Go do things related to law, talk to people, get your mindset around it, because it does require a significant commitment of time, effort, and money. And if you're not really interested in practicing, you might find a different kind of graduate degree is more useful for you. So just a thought there.
Thank you all for sharing. It was really nice hearing that all of you had a unique experience in your path to law. And I'll definitely take into consideration taking time off to be a legal assistant and really see if law is what I want to do personally. Kind of going off of that, our next question is, what is the typical day like for you? And since all of you guys have your own firms, how is that compared to when you worked for someone else?
Yeah, so I worked at big law firms, so it was a grind. It was a lot of work. And especially as a young associate, I worked very, very long hours. I don't regret a minute of that, because I learned a lot in those hours that I spent. I gained a huge amount of knowledge and a really terrific skill set by putting in that time early in my career. So I think it was useful. It was very tiring and exhausting though. And I wouldn't want to live that way now, but when I was younger, it was okay. Also, so then I've had different stages in my career. When I became a partner, I focused a lot more on client development than on actually doing a lot of legal work. I did some legal work, but mostly I was supervising my team of people, and I was out bringing in business. So the job functions kind of shifted a bit. And then, with my own firm now, the benefit of having worked all those years in a big law firm is that I could afford to retire. So basically, I work part-time now, and it's a retirement gig for me because I'm really retired.
So what I find with my my typical day is, especially after COVID, it's kind of like you're working all day long, but with breaks in between, because you can do emails on your iPhone, you can open up your laptop and do a couple of things while you're eating breakfast. And then, you go into the office, which I do because in immigration, a lot of it is paper-based. So our filings, a lot of the kinds of filings I prepare, which is more on the employment side, they are paper-based. So, I mean, if I'm very honest with you, and I know a lot of lawyers, when I worked at Fragaman, which is a very large immigration law firm, and, not at the courts. If you go work in the government, and especially in the judiciary, your hours are a little more predictable. It's certain government jobs, like if you're an asylum officer, or if you are working for Homeland Security, or if you're working for the State Department, you can have a more kind of not bureaucrats, horrible word to say, but just more government official hours. But when you have your own practice, one of the things is you're responsible for bringing in the business too. So it's like you have a lot of work, maybe just on the client management, the case management, but then you also have business development stuff, whether you're doing a webinar or you're writing blog posts or you're going to an event. So there's that piece too. So my typical workday, more concretely, like hours wise, when I first wake up, I usually wake up right before 6 and do a first pass at my emails. And that's because I have clients throughout the world. And so to factor in the time difference in California, I've already got like an inbox full of emails. So just go through the first pass, and then I deal with the kids and getting them to school. And then I do another pass where I assign things to the team. And then I'm usually working, I would say like 9 to 7. And then I'm with the family again. And then there's a little bit at night just to get ahead on the next day. So, you know, again, I think with ever since COVID and post-COVID, I think the ability to kind of spread out your workday, it's a result of it. But I try not to work on the weekends. When I was at Fragaman, I definitely had the longer hours in the office because there's something called like FaceTime. You know, you have to just show that you're there. And so you would just physically be there. Let's say like I used to generally in New York, I used to work 9:30 to like 7:30 or 8. So those are kind of like the hours, you know, but in California, I mean, I worked in New York where work-life balance is not the same thing that we have on the Pacific Northwest or in California. But yeah, I mean, your hours will be long, and they'll be long even if you start your own practice, because you have so many different responsibilities at that point.
So my work hours have definitely shifted again, pre-COVID situation, but also because in the early part of my practice, my first couple of 5, 6 years, I was constantly doing all the hearings, appearances. I was representing people that were they were detained, so they were in immigration facilities where I would have to leave my house at 5, 6 in the morning, and then go to that hearing to be there by 7, and then handle my hearing. So on those days, for example, then I wouldn't schedule any consults or any other appointments that were gonna, just take up some time, and I would just come back to the office or work from home and do casework. But I want to say, so that was like the first 5 to 6 years. I was really intense in being in court, being the attorney that was there, 3 to 4 times a week. So I'd have to be at court early, and then I would get to my consults days. Over the time that I like started to kind of find more of my pattern and what I'm better at, I'm better at client acquisition versus being in court, because being in court, I start getting this anxiety about all the other things I have to do. And if it's maybe something like a simple continuance, then I started to bring on a team. So attorneys would either co-counsel with me or to bring them on as contract attorneys. And so then they started handling more of the court, and I would be at the office by 9 or 10, and then just do back-to-back consults one day, and then the next day would be my casework day. So I had that flexibility where I just started to figure out what's better for me, what works for me. But I have definitely learned about my weekends have been more of now my weekends have shifted to become 1 or 2 weekends I use to do community events. So I go out to a community festival, or I go to some type of speaking engagement at a youth center. We do a lot of work now with the boxing gym. So I have been able to use my weekends, 1 or 2 weekends a month, to do these kinds of community events. And then the times when I'm not doing community events, and I stay home with my kids, and I enjoy having a day at home and not leaving the house at all, and getting delivery, and just being able to be more relaxed and centered at home. So I think that having a private practice gives you a lot of flexibility, but and it gives you a lot of things on your plate. And so then you'd have to really do like a lot of figuring out what works for you. And in my early years, I had to do the scheduled morning courts, afternoon courts. um, and now, in 10 years later, I'm very selective about what court hearings I'm going to be at. If it's a very important, complicated hearing, I need to be there. My client expects me to be there. I'm going to be the one representing them there. But I think that that's what private practice does. It gives you that liberty to kind of find your strengths and really hone in on it and make your practice what you want and what makes you happy. And I'm not a morning person. I like to wake up a little later and get my kids ready to go off to school, and then kind of, go through my emails and get myself ready and then head into the office.
Thank you so much for sharing and kind of giving your insights into what like a day-to-day work schedule looks like for all of you. Especially interesting to note like the differences in hours between working for the government or having your own practice. And that's something I didn't really think about. So it's definitely really insightful to hear. Moving on to our next question I wanted to ask, now that all three of you are deeper into your legal careers, is it everything that you expected it? And is there something that you didn't expect about the industry that ended up being true?
Yeah, so I've been very happy being a lawyer. I found a path that was good for me where I got to be involved in important issues and things that required a lot of thought and creativity and effort, and I enjoy doing that. I enjoy accomplishing things, and I felt with my type of practice, when you close a deal, there's a great sense of accomplishment. You're done with it, and usually we have a party, and and so there are moments when you feel like you've really done something. I also, even though I have a transactional practice, so it's very paper intensive and a lot of negotiation and drafting of contracts and so on. And you can see it as just pushing paper around, or in the case of the types of deals I'm doing, a lot of money changes hands and so on. So millions of dollars are shifting from one company to another, and maybe it doesn't seem like it's very meaningful on that level. But I always saw it as essential. Like I was helping companies to get the investments or get the loans, get the money in that they needed in order to make their products, which are useful for people, hire people and keep them in jobs and keep food on the table for their families. And I saw it as having a greater purpose. And so I found meaning in the work that I was doing, even though it wasn't really all that personal, as it were. And my husband was a district attorney, both in LA and San Francisco, and over the years, and his work, involved people going to jail and very long sentences, and it really affected people's lives in a deeper way. So it was much more emotional. And I actually appreciated that my practice didn't carry a lot of emotions. People didn't usually cry in my office, and it made it a little easier to kind of close the door on it at the end of the day and not carry it home with me. So that was also a good thing. So I've really enjoyed being a lawyer all these years. I probably won't practice very long into retirement, but I'm still enjoying it right now. So I like it.
So for me, it's interesting. When I first went to law school, building on my experience in Washington, D.C. at the UNHCR, I wanted to be a refugee lawyer. So I was determined to do human rights and work with refugees. And I actually, while I was in law school, went and spent a summer working in Bosnia. This is a long time ago, in '99, when NATO was bombing Kosovo. So I was like right there working in refugee camps and coming up with like just a policy report on how we got to manage the return of migrants from Bosnians from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland back to Bosnia, given the influx of refugees coming into Bosnia from Kosovo. I was really in the thick of it, and it was very intense. And then at the end of my law school career, I went and did a fellowship at the European Court of Human Rights, where I was looking at how torture was defined for purposes of human rights protection. Okay, so after all of this, I have to say I was starting to feel a little bit weighed down by the just intensity of human rights work. And I went to Fragment because I also had student loans to think about. And I also wanted a job where it wasn't contract based. Like if you try and go work at the UN, or if you try to do a job in a nonprofit in human rights, it's often just year-to-year fellowships. It's low pay. Now, my law school had a loan forgiveness program if you went to work in the public interest, but still, you know, this was all just very stressful as I thought about the reality of it. So I went to work at Fragman, and what I discovered is that I actually loved business immigration law. And what that means is helping companies sponsor foreign nationals to come and work in the United States. I do family-based stuff too. I do citizenship. I do a little bit of crimmigration. And so basically what I found is, oh, I never expected that I would enjoy all this that much. So I slowly moved away from the hardcore human rights practice. I do some asylum cases because of my 5 years at the federal courts. I did work on, you know, so it's interesting. I spent 8 years at Fragman, but that pool of public interest, public sector work, it was still there. So I went and spent 5 years in the federal judiciary. And after that, I was like, oh no, I want to go back to doing employment-based work. I like the balance of you're still very much helping people. It's not so like you don't have the secondary stress of, you know, absorbing their stress. I mean, they're stressed, but not like with you know, the Kosovars fleeing bombing. And it pays well, right? So like you can have a really good life doing business immigration. And I think it hits that sweet spot of very personally satisfying, rewarding work, while, you know, you can make a good income. The other thing I do want to say that surprised me about my practice is that 20 years out, what's really interesting is I love the business development piece. And I never imagined myself as that person. And I will tell you, when I first started practicing in New York, the partner for whom I used to work would be like, okay, you got to get to this networking event. You got to get to that networking event. And I'd be like, I hate networking events. I don't want to just go talk to people I don't know. I don't like this. It's uncomfortable. And he would always say to me, well, you've got to learn to network. And it's interesting, fast forward now 20 odd years, I really enjoy it. I enjoy going out and meeting people and telling people about my practice, and I'm doing something like this, you know. Like I think when I was right out of law school, I would have been very self-conscious, and you know, just wanted to do my work and then go home and work out. So that's another piece that I didn't expect in myself as a lawyer.
Just going off of that, I believe that that's one of the situations with my firm. It's that I always thought that I was just going to be in court advocating and, you know, helping families in navigating this process, but I didn't understand that my voice could be heard in a much more like national scale, or that my voice could be heard and impact more families. So I didn't see myself as like a spokesperson, sort of. And so what I have now seen myself in, and for the past 2 years, I've been hosting a national TV show in Spanish, and I talk for an hour about immigration issues. And I didn't see myself in that position because I had imagined me being a more localized attorney, you know, helping folks in LA. And now I'm like in a national market where we get callers from Massachusetts and Florida and Texas calling about their immigration situation. And obviously I give them very general, like, know your rights stuff, but I obviously tell them to go get a consult or call a local attorney or their bar for a reputable attorney. But it is something that I didn't see myself in that role, in that position, to be able to reach so many people and still feel effective, like still feel like we're helping people know their rights. And I thought that it was more of a local thing or a Los Angeles thing. And I'm also finding myself with clients in places like Ohio and, and New York and South Carolina. So I didn't realize the amount of net that you could help folks and how much impact that could do to the community. I also didn't imagine myself also being at a lot of networking events with now PI attorneys, so personal injury attorneys and employment lawyers, and the cross section between all these practices. So a lot of personal injury attorneys reach out to me to help their clients who have been injured or have some type of a claim, and they want me to help them also navigate their immigration case or in employment. Now that employment, if they're being a victim of a labor violation, then it goes into the immigration path for them to hopefully get some type of a status or protection. So I didn't see that I would also be in an arena where I'd have so many different types of attorneys also reaching out to me for assistance and collaborating.
Thank you all for sharing. That's really interesting that during your like career you discovered more things that you enjoy that like you didn't expect you'd enjoy. Um, Kind of going off of that, what's the most challenging part of your profession? And even like, was there a particular case or project in your career that you worked on that was more difficult or frustrating? Or if you'd like to like share a case that you found to be like your favorite or like really interesting to you.
So, yeah, so I'm thinking about the thing that I have enjoyed the most about practicing and the cases or the deals that I've worked on that I've liked the best are the ones where the opposing counsel and I are kind of thinking the same way. Now, in transactions, they're usually, at least on the surface, they're generally friendly. Like, I'm trying to get the deal done for my client because it's going to help them. It's also going to help the other side. We're working toward kind of a common goal, which is the opposite of litigation, where it's too late. We're not friends anymore. We're in court fighting about something. So with my practice, it was usually very friendly, and I approached things very practically. I'm not the kind of lawyer that really gets excited about academic issues in the law. There are people like that who really get into the details of why the law is the way it is and how, and so on. And in transactions, that's maybe not the best thought process because it kind of bogs you down. Like, we're trying to get a deal done here. We're not interested in theory. We're interested in reality. So if the other person on the other side was like that too, then we could get the deal done quickly and in a very straightforward kind of manner. And if the person on the other side was not that way, and occasionally I would get somebody who was really a litigator who thought he could also do transactions. And I say he because more men did this than women, where they would feel like, oh, I'm an attorney, I can practice in any area of the law, and had no experience with transactions, but like, oh, I can do a transaction, no big deal. And then I'd get this guy all full of himself trying to, say, well, I've been practicing law for 40 years and I know how to do blah, 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 and I'm like, okay, whatever. You've never done one of these deals, so you don't actually know what you're doing. But they would slow things down and it would be really miserable. So a lot of it, I think, in my own practice has depended on who was on the other side of the table and how they would approach the transaction. And if they came in with guns blazing like a litigator trying to win something, it was just a nightmare to try to get the deal done. Whereas if they came in with and I found it for my own practice to be more friendly and to try to build a relationship, because that's what both clients were trying to do, then it would help the transaction along. And that was part of the deal. And that fit my personality better too. I really prefer having a more positive approach to my practice than the more negative overtones that sometimes come with litigation. So, to each his own.
For me, I think the part that can be challenging of running a small practice, so I'll put it that way, is really just the amount. I think what I didn't realize when I started my own practice is that you're a small business owner, and so you have a lot of responsibility that you don't really realize. So now I've grown my team to 10, and it's like a payroll and California HR laws, and California's HR employment laws a change. And, now we have to provide pension funds and just all these things. And also, like, how do you let someone go? How do you hire someone? What do you ask when you hire? So I finally got an office manager because I am just not good with that was really hard for me, getting kind of bogged down, because I'm a lawyer, not someone who knows how to set up a 401k plan. And so that has been just challenging. And I think if you're going to start at some point in your career, if you want to start your own practice, or maybe start a practice with another lawyer, that's something to keep in mind, is that you're going to have to do a lot of like running a business. And there are lots of resources out there. And so just, research them or find them. That's what I ended up doing. And I ended up hiring an office manager part-time who's a full-blown HR professional. And she actually works at a couple of law firms in the area. So that's kind of just also something I wanted to share, which is, you will encounter challenges as a lawyer in your practice, whatever. And I think that important thing is to know that there are resources out there. And another thing on that note is I do a lot of presentations. And so, I'm terrible at PowerPoint. I'm not creative. It's hard for me to come up with beautiful slides. And so there are platforms that you can hire people, graphic designers. So I have this like amazing graphic designer in London, and she prepares all of these PowerPoints for me. So again, if you are aware that something's hard for you, or you don't have time to do something, there's ways to outsource. And again, relatedly, I do a podcast, like very short episodes on certain kinds of visa categories. And I don't know what I'm doing, like I'm not a podcast producer, but I went on this platform, it's called Upwork, and I found a podcast producer who could take my recording, and I found someone who could do my podcast sleeve. And so what I have found most challenging about being a lawyer is the non-lawyer aspects of running a practice. And what I've found, though, that is very reassuring is that there are lots of resources out there to help.
Yeah, I really like that, because there's definitely also something that's in us, a lot of us, that we like to handle everything. We like to kind of control things, and it's important to also understand where you're just not going to be as effective, and it's better to have someone that is really good at that skill to take over. I think for me in particular, with immigration law and what happens with like administration and the policy changes, I think the most frustrating part of my career has been when something comes out, there's something that the news or the media puts out, and you're just like constantly kind of dispelling myths. And I think that over time, it also gets really it bogs you down, because you're like constantly reassuring and dispelling myths, but you have to do it in a way that's also going to reach as many people, and you're not having to spend all day on the phone, and or like talking to people about this new thing they heard on the news. So I think that one of the projects has always been that I've been always struggling with is trying to create content, because now it's a content based kind of legal industry where there's constantly a video being posted on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube, and trying to keep up with all these platforms and get good information out there, and information that is honest and trustworthy, and competing against folks that are just trying to get clients and trying to get them at any means, and telling them things that they want to hear versus things that it's the law. And so I think that's what's been frustrating about now, like with the administrations and the policy changes and updates and the media. So you're competing against all these voices that people hear, and you're trying to do it in a way that reaches people, but also doesn't bog you down all day. And so I have definitely felt that in this kind of situation with TikTok and Instagram, social media being now the way that people find an attorney and find information about the law, is also trying to keep up with that and keep up with it in a way that's ethical and honest, and that people are not being bamboozled into some, fake immigration case they may have. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. And it's really insightful to kind of hear the aspects of law that you don't always hear about. And it's good to keep that in mind when going throughout law school and trying to figure out what type of law you want to do and what exactly you're getting into. To kind of go off of that in law school, in your opinion, how important is it to find a mentor in law school or within your law journey? And did you yourselves have any mentors that helped guide you through this process?
Well, I just think that mentors are critical. They're incredibly important throughout your entire legal career, because you'll graduate from law school and you'll know a lot of things, and you'll also not know enough about how to actually practice law. You won't, and so you learn a lot on the job when you graduate, and you learn from people who've gone before you. Sometimes those people are in your own firm, sometimes they're not. But you absolutely need mentors. And in law school itself, it is really helpful when you're brand new to connect with with students who are second or third years, because you come in as a first year law student and it's overwhelming, and you can easily get bogged down in spending too much time on the wrong things and trying to stay up with the reading and preparing for class in a way that isn't actually useful. And so a lot of law schools have mentor programs. Sometimes they have programs like UCLA had one where they would match up women with women who were more senior or people of color and so on. But there are a lot of different ways to go about that. But I think you should have mentors among the students. And then it is also helpful to get to know faculty members, because they will write recommendations for you. They will be useful to you in introducing you to people that they know who might hire you, especially if in an area that you're interested in. Spend the time to get to know some of the people on the faculty or in the career services office and various other places. Those people can be of huge help to you. So I think that's really I absolutely, my whole career, have benefited from mentors, and of any gender and any age, and and all that too. Just a variety of people is actually more useful too. So yeah.
I completely agree. Mentors are critical in terms of also brainstorming how to move forward. And for me, one of those critical discussions actually was during law school, where I was starting. I had an exit interview for my student loans, and that was incredibly sobering. And I remember they give those to you at the beginning of your third year of law school, like, okay, here's how much you'll have borrowed when you graduate. This is what it's going to look like. And I remember being like, oh! And I went and talked to my professor about, I'm really intimidated by these amounts, and I'm intimidated by the salaries being offered for human rights jobs. And so it was actually a professor of mine who said, go work at Fragment. It'll give you that perfect in between. You'll have a good salary, and you can get your loans under control, and you'll still be getting relevant experience in immigration, and you can always make the move to the public sector when you're ready. So that was, and then it was that professor who introduced me to Fragment, got me an interview there, and that's how I got to Fragment. And then at that firm, I just had partners who were, I didn't even maybe even like them. And I didn't, it was like weird. Like I got fantastic training and I didn't realize it from these partners. So sometimes someone is unwittingly your mentor. If you have a group, like someone who's really just like this one partner, and I now write him 20 years later saying, I'm so grateful for all that you taught me, although I didn't act so grateful when I was, in my mid-20s working for you. But I think that, approaching those people who are more experienced and like really learning from them, and even if it doesn't resonate in that moment, I think that you will end up having mentors naturally through, whoever supervises you. So I would say make sure you're, insofar as at law school, even undergrad, those professors, those supervisors at internships. Oh, by the way, I'll share one last story on that. Not a mentor, but when I finished my first year of law school, I did a law clerkship with a nonprofit group, forced migration projects. And my immediate supervisor was this lovely attorney who was just a few years older than me, but she had graduated from law school and she was working there as like a junior attorney. And so she supervised us interns. Well, we ended up becoming very good friends and we stayed in touch. I went to her wedding, like we were very good friends. She and I both ended up in the Bay Area. She was the GC, general counsel of a fintech startup that she retained me to do their immigration work. And they have ended up becoming one of my largest clients. They have 2,000 employees. And it's that relationship of 20 odd years, that allowed me to get this big client. So she always remembered like what kind of intern I was and how hard I worked. And so sustained our relationship. So she wasn't necessarily a mentor, but she was my supervisor. And so those relationships are just going to be critical in your professional journey.
Amazing. Yes, I I completely agree because I have a similar story where people from 20 years ago are incredibly so giving to me now. Growing up in the community that I grew up in, there weren't a lot of attorneys that I could rely on or go speak to or any of that. But at one point when I was in high school, I remember going to a conference and this attorney speaking. She was a woman, Latina woman, who was speaking about being an immigration attorney. And I remember meeting her at that point. And then when I became an attorney, she was only an attorney from that community. When I became an attorney, within my first year or so, I came back to my community and I did an event, and she showed up to the event and she was like, I'm so proud of you that you're doing this event in this community. And so I kept in contact with her. And when she decided to retire, she'd been in practice for 25 to 30 years. She had decided to retire. She said, I have this TV show in 2020. She told me, I have this TV show and I would love for you to be on the show and you be the presenter of the show, the host of it. And so that opportunity from years ago, from being in high school and just, being open and being so transparent about how you didn't know a lot of attorneys, you would love to keep a connection, and then them seeing you on the ground doing your work as an attorney really, really was this gift that I have the show. But in terms of also mentors that are not just attorneys, I also would encourage you to really gain connections with, if you work at a law firm, with the law clerks and the legal assistants and the paralegals, because a lot of times those are the staff that are running the office, that are doing the nitty gritty work, that are dealing with the complicated questions. And I probably wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for the legal assistants and the paralegals at my old firm, who have since left that firm, but they continue to do work with me and the contract work with me. And so I really appreciate those opportunities of folks that maybe necessarily didn't become attorneys, but that do have that on the ground experience, the experience of dealing with complicated issues. And not only do they support me, the attorneys that I worked with, I call them all the time, we text, they continue to support me. And so I think that we could never dismiss somebody's role just for their title. Like, people in the legal field, if you're transparent and open and very also giving back, if you can support them. I remember when I first started, my mentors that were the attorneys that I worked with, I would offer them, like, do you need someone to go do an appearance for you? I can go do the appearance. I want to be, if you're not available, I'll handle that court for you. Just let me know what I got to do. Give me a rundown. And so I think that was something that I really, really do encourage you to do, is to also give back to those mentors.
Thank you so much for sharing and kind of highlighting the importance of having mentors and having that support system to kind of guide you throughout your legal career and practice. Since we are running out of time, I wanted to end with one more closing question that we like to ask at the end of all our panels. And that is, what is one last piece of advice you'd like to impart on our undergraduate pre-law members?
Well, I always find that question difficult, but I'm just going to say quickly, your career will be long, and so don't feel like the first job you take or the first place you end up is where you're always going to be. And the first thing that you can think of to do when you graduate from undergrad is probably not where you're going to end up being. And so, life has a lot of surprises in store for you, and twists and turns and so on. And so just kind of roll with the punches, do what comes your way and follow your passion, do what you're interested in doing. And you'll find it all works out really well in the end. So don't be afraid. But just, if law is what you want to do, fantastic. But again, even you don't have to know the specific area. You don't have to have it all plotted out at age 22. You can figure this out kind of as you go. And that may be a little bit reassuring, just to think, you don't have to make life-changing decisions today. You always have a chance to kind of make more choices in the future, do things a little differently if you don't like what you end up with, and life goes on. So I want to wish you all good luck, and I put my email in the chat. If you do have further questions, feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk, and really enjoyed being here with all of you today.
I would say very similar things to what Susan did, which is, do not stress about making the choices that you do, that you think that it's permanent. Even just in my 20 odd years, I worked at Fragment in their New York office. And then I realized I didn't like New York. So I moved to Brussels. And then I realized after 2 years in Brussels, I actually want to go back to California, where I spent a large part of my life. And then I went and worked in the federal judiciary, and I realized, I think I like private practice, and I also moved from human rights to more employment based. So there's lots of room for, pivoting. And so it doesn't have to be permanent, and you will have your ebbs and flows with your love for the law. There will be times when you just love your work, and there will be times where other things will be more important, but I definitely, that's on the macro level. On the micro level, I encourage you to do legal internships, or work, just get into a legal environment just to check it out and make sure. Like I said, I have 4 legal assistants, I have 2 legal interns, and they're all just figuring out if they want to do the law. And I would also encourage you to use LinkedIn, start putting yourself out there, connecting with people, putting posts. Because I know as an employer, when I get candidates, I look at every candidate's LinkedIn profile, just to get a sense of their feeds and what they're saying and how they describe themselves. So those are my micro tips, and good luck for sure.
Just repeating again, the flexibility, you have the flexibility to just really decide also once you become an attorney or when, what area you want to practice. But in the meantime, I would say just really open up as well. Like, I know it's hard to, if you're not like a social, like you don't like being in crowds of people and stuff, but also like you can now with Instagram or with LinkedIn, as you mentioned, and the ways that people connect now virtually. Do not be afraid to just reach out and just cold kind of email or message people, and you just never know who you'll find. Of course, just be careful about people like also wanting to, take advantage or anything of that situation, but just you really should throw your net out there and then see what people you meet in this industry. I never imagined myself going to networking events when I was in law school, and I truly think that that would have been a great opportunity to meet more people. But I'm catching up now as a more seasoned attorney. But I just would keep encouraging that, like, you don't have to have a set plan or goal. And my heart was just like, I want to represent people and help people, but I didn't imagine that I would be in this certain area of the law. And I'm, able, the resources are opened, and now I'm able to really reach a lot of people. So I think that is the great part about this practice. And if you truly have your heart in it, you can do it, make it happen.
All right. Thank you all for sharing all your insights and helpful information, and for graciously sharing your contact information to all our members. So if any of your members have any questions, feel free to contact our amazing panelists. And just thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your day.
Oh, thank you for organizing this and for including me. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Good evening,
Take care,
everybody.
everyone.